last week and has declared that America will be the Bitcoin superpower. That is prescient. I would hazard to guess that the great majority of the people that saw that post don't even know what Bitcoin superpower means, and they haven't really considered it. I was inspired by the words, and that caused me to put together this presentation today. Why is Bitcoin critical to the prosperity of the United States in the 21st century? That is the question we all should be asking. There are many metaphors for thinking about a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital capital. If we thought of it as Bitcoin as digital capital, is this a stockpile of cheese? Is this a stockpile of oil, natural gas, or even uranium, all of which would be interesting? Well, at its worst case, in its narrowest form, you could think about the strategic Bitcoin reserve as a stockpile of the apex asset of the human race. And so what's it worth? Well, over the next 20 years, I think it's worth anywhere from $3 trillion to $106 trillion to the United States. U.S. corporations, like my corporation, are actually recapitalizing on Bitcoin. We've gone from having $250 million of assets 48 months ago to having nearly $45 billion of assets in 48 months. If you look out over the next 20 years, corporations that are accumulating Bitcoin on their reserve, like MSTR, like Mara, like Riot, they're going to have $20 to $40 trillion. So this is a small metaphor, but it's a powerful metaphor. But, you know, it's hard to rent out or finance or develop your cheese or your gold or your natural gas buried in a vault. So a more powerful metaphor is Bitcoin is digital property. If you own 5% of Manhattan and your family owned it for 100 years and someone said, how are you going to pay your bills? You wouldn't say, we're just going to sell it. You would say, we're going to rent it. We're going to develop it. We're going to put a building on top of it, a business on top of it, or we're going to finance it. We're going to borrow against it. The same is true with Bitcoin. In 20 years, the United States could be generating $10 trillion per year by renting, developing, or financing the assets in that strategic Bitcoin reserve. The AIs are coming. The AIs don't get bank accounts. They don't get credit cards. The AIs, the artificial intelligence economy, will be built on digital capital, digital property. It'll be a $100 trillion economy. It'll be built on Bitcoin. Well, a lot of people, they think of it as an asset. You think of it as a property, but what we know to be true is that Bitcoin is actually a network, and it's not just any network. It's not an information network. It's an energy network.
You muted the audio.
I lose it. You have it. That is the conservation of energy.
I'm all done on my end, though.
So when you start to visualize Bitcoin as a digital energy network, what you realize is that trillions of dollars of digital commerce will flow over that network. The banking system of the world is going to rebuild itself on a digital energy network. I wanted to finish this point. We're going to have 40,000 banks that'll be settling with each other in real time. Finally, moving billions, tens of billions, or hundreds of billions of dollars an hour over a pure digital network, right? So if you look at the world and imagine digital energy moving around the world, and then you ask the question, would you want to own it? Or would you want to ignore it? It's an important question. And of course, you know, I think some of you might have seen the cyber blackout of X yesterday and all the cyber attacks. The last and most important metaphor is when we have open digital energy flowing, it is a commerce network. But when we reverse that digital energy into a shield, it becomes a defense system. Bitcoin's a digital defense system. Bitcoin messages, data authentications, transactions, they're unstoppable, uncorruptible, immutable, immune to tampering by any known cyber threat. You can protect the United States commercial and military and financial systems behind a wall of digital energy. And that's exactly how we will do it. Even Elon Musk pointed out, the AIs don't know how to hack Bitcoin. They can spoof you out of your money. They can convince you that there's someone they're not. There's no way to trick an 800 exahash digital wall that's based on modern encryption. The AIs won't get through that wall. What's driving the growth of Bitcoin? It is the most powerful force in the world right now. It's growing nearly 60%. It's become the eighth largest asset in the world. It's about to become the largest asset in the world in the next 48 months.
I mean, I think that's probably a good place to just pause, Sailor. In the next 48 months, that is a very short time period to take over everything else. The 7 spots above him, back it up just to the.
Did he say he said it would take out the others on top of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can listen to it again, but I'll point out, here's what we're looking at. We're looking at silver, which is 1.8 trillion, which we've already eclipsed. I think, I don't know where he got the slide, but that's kind of old. I know we've kind of dropped down within the past couple of days, but we've already gone over the $2 trillion mark. So I don't think we had ever beat Amazon. Maybe we had, but the 2.1 trillion, where we start to overtake Alphabet and Amazon, which is Google. You have NVIDIA at 2.7, which will, it's going to blow by NVIDIA. Microsoft's 2.9, and you got Apple at 3.6 trillion and gold at $19.6 trillion until they revalue gold, which we're probably going to get into in a little bit here. But yeah, you listen to what he says, and he says in 48 months.
It is the most powerful force in the world right now. It's growing nearly 60%. It's become the eighth largest asset in the world. It's about to become the largest asset in the world in the next 48 months.
That's a
huge statement.
Fat ass, bold ass claim right there.
Dude, that's $1 million of Bitcoin. Like that. At about 10 to 12 trillion dollars. That's literally $1 million per Bitcoin.
Yeah.
In 48 months. That's huge.
It's hard to, because the reflex is to kind of just okay, he's Eloning right now, right? Like he's overselling and overselling and really compressing the realistic timeline. But the funny thing is that, so we might actually just use this to roll into we're still in the intro, but because the thing that I want to say that sounds like, what's up man, Montani, my first initial reaction is Sailor, stop. That's almost too bullish, right? Because
it's Samson Mao.
Yeah, I was gonna say Samson Mao because
hey, I got nothing but love for Samson.
I got nothing but love either. But when you're going out and saying it's hey guys, I know we just dropped 30%, but $1 million per Bitcoin is still on the table and we're floating around 80. I'm Samson, I love you.
Yeah.
But no, I'm sorry, but I just don't see a way, barring actual legitimate collapse, that we go from $81,000 to $1 million in 9 months. That's, if we do that, in my opinion, that's the actual catastrophic stuff that Jeff Booth talks about, where it's yeah, we didn't, that's not a slow gradient transition from one network to the next. That's an abrupt shift, right? And when you do abrupt network transitions, shit breaks, people are screaming, and there's fire everywhere, and you're just like that dog in the fire room. It's oh no, this is fine,
Yeah.
But at the same time, that would be dope as hell.
And that's the thing is, I try to think back into who the people are. Obviously, Samson sticks out for his, Omega candles, and is going to rip your fucking faces off and all that kind of stuff, right? I know there's a lot of hopium out there, and it's a matter of time. Whether it's tomorrow or the next day or 10 years from now, we know what happens.
And we actually want it to not do that in 2 years. We want it to take as long as possible. At least I do, greedily, because I want to keep scooping up DCA Bitcoin for as long as I can. Because guess what? If it goes to $1 million in 48 months, we're not getting a whole lot of sats left anymore, right?
No, and it was great. I think Simply Bitcoin guys, they credit to those guys too, man. Nico and Oppie, the team
Yeah.
over there at Simply, they put out a halving chart earlier today, and I'd look it up, but I want to talk instead. But basically, you start looking, within our short little lifetimes, when you've got all of this apparatus, which is in its like fledgling stages right now, literally fledgling stages. After seeing what I've seen in Bitcoin mining, I got to tell you, there's a lot of room for improvement and for optimization and for energy capture and a whole bunch of other things, right? To see where we're at right now and to know where we're going, this is, they're going to be spending just untold amounts of time and money and energy and resources on mining Bitcoin at 0.000 something within our lifetime. And that's an incredible thing to say, right? When you look at, guys right now who have, hundreds, if not thousands of coins, or hundreds of thousands in this case, sometimes, you start to understand like what he's actually talking about. And credit to Guy Swan as well. Some of the greats, man, we are just name dropping everywhere right now. Guy Swan, when in one of Guy's takes, it was a while back when he was starting to address some of the worries about AI and how it was going to work. One of the things he said that stuck out to me was that this was going to be a technology that obviously used Bitcoin to settle and to settle rapidly. And they were all going to have bank accounts, and this AI would be doing this for these people, and this AI would be doing this, and those AIs would be interacting, and those AIs would be interacting with everybody else. Well, the thing is that cost. It costs time, it costs money, it costs resources. You've got everything involved in terms of that computing power. And when you start to understand that these data centers don't run themselves, that's a lot. And so that computation to where, you're paying for all of this, it's not going to be, hey, Bob, send me an invoice, for this. No, this thing's going to go over there and do a micro job, and it's going to get a micro payment. And that has to be settled right now between these two AIs. And the only thing that's going to be able to do that's Bitcoin.
Yeah. And they're just going to do it for like a sat, just to it's almost like it's going to be like a check mark. It's like, all right, payment received, on to the next task. Because like the thing that I think the thing that people don't really realize is that, like, aside from the fact that, because like something that we've talked about, and I know I've talked about with a lot of you guys, is like the reality kind of like stemming off of that Guy Swan conversation, is there's going to be AIs that are like specialized in very specific tasks, and there's going to be AIs that are designed to manage those different specialists according to certain parameters and certain like outcomes and goals and everything like that. But then each one of those AIs is also going to be capable of, like, if you guys haven't looked into AI agents, like every one of those AIs is going to have its own AI agents that are going to be doing its own tasks. It's just going to be one massive hierarchy of all this artificial intelligence just doing automated tasks. Like what that does for production and everything, just on the Bitcoin mining and energy management and power distribution alone, I could see it getting to the point of like that 48-month timeline. Like, we're looking at a completely different power infrastructure grid here in the US that like people could not have fathomed like 6 months ago.
I agree. And I think we've said this a couple times where, the Trump administration kind of slow rolled this SBRs, I think, as much as they possibly could. And when you look at what's just happened, the executive order for the SBR, it's not a digital assets. It's we literally have now a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And that is going to be something that, if you are paying attention and you're looking at this space and you go, all right, well, we need power, we need Bitcoin, we need a mining sector that's going to make sure that this is done here in the United States,
and then manufacturing, and then that's it.
Yeah, look, if you don't understand what this is the tech revolution, and this is the migration of defense into the Bitcoin space, all rolled into one. And I don't think people have any idea what that means. everything that we have is going to go into building the product, which is Bitcoin mining, and it is going to absolutely, I mean, I think it's going to turn this economy around in a heartbeat, man. We're talking about, I know we've got it in the show tonight. We've got some graphs on in terms of a recession's coming. Well, if you need jobs, I'm going to tell you right now, mining, electrical, all of those things, if you're out there looking for an understanding or maybe where to get a toehold in this, in this next evolution of human history, that's where it's at.
Yeah. Electrical engineering is like, just from what I've seen with my job, I'm like, wow. Like, if I would have known this is going to be the likelihood, I should have definitely should have gone to college for something different.
electrical engineering for one, maybe.
Yeah. Like, it's going to be absolutely insane. Like, I mean, it already is. Like, it's like, if you guys haven't had the pleasure of being able to interact with some of these guys that are working in the mining sectors, like for like the riots and the Maras and the Clean Sparks, and especially all the one of the cool things about Texas and North Dakota is all of the little private oil producers that are all secretly mining Bitcoin with their natural gas production, because they're small. Like, they don't have the economics to pipe it out or get it liquefied. So they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna mine Bitcoin. And these guys are, I think they might be the most aggressively orange pilled people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Like, they're more orange pilled than all of us. And I'm like, look, dude, you need to chill, like, relax. Like, I've been here. I get it. Like, I get that you're excited and you're trying to gobble up as much natural gas as you can, but like, it's awesome. I freaking love those oil guys.
I think, the beautiful thing is with this evolution and revolution, honestly, when you kind of understand, what this is, man, this is something that the Bitcoin culture has been waiting for. And this is one of the areas where it's going to, bleed down into everything else. And I say that because a lot of companies are still controlled by that DEI, EPA bullshit, right? Like all the stuff that BlackRock was pushing. And now I think it's that pendulum has swung so hard, and they know they have to make money and they have to be on this revolution and evolution with us. So it's like all those things are going to get, just thrown to the side. Absolutely. Like, hey, all this DEI bullshit, all of, this environmental, what is it? ESG, all that ESG bullshit. All of this stuff is going to get scrapped so hard and so fast by the same BlackRock that owns like 50% of like every major corporation out there to be part of this revolution. This is what's going to be really awesome, is you guys out there that have all the knowledge and understanding of what this space is. You guys that know how to do electrical engineering, you guys know how to network, you guys know how to, put in, concrete and buildings and all this. This is your heyday. You need to wake up. You need to get, you need to start looking for these type of jobs. You need to start making the connections. And what's beautiful about this is this culture is going to infect at the highest levels, because you are early still. If you're there, you're early. This is going to infect those cultures, and everything downstream from power is going to get orange pilled, and it's gonna, it's the vision that I had, out in the woods, man, where you start to see like that green matrix start to have those flecks of orange in it. And all of a sudden those orange streaks, and then the whole thing is just fucking.
You're giving me goosebumps, because you're starting to sound like me. Cause I don't normally toot my own horn, but I'm going to toot my own horn and say that for the last couple of years, I can proudly, pound my own shield, in a sense of saying, it's like, I've been saying for years that like, the thing that touches society isn't going to be the philosophical changes to the individual that Bitcoin provides as a monetary asset. It's going to be what it does to power.
Yeah.
What it does to power is going to change absolutely everybody's lives. And the best part is 95% of the people aren't going to know that Bitcoin was doing it until they get to the point of where they're the late ones getting orange pilled. And then they realize, oh shit, the reason why our power got so much cheaper and all this other stuff is because of Bitcoin mining. Like 10 years before I started like actually listening and investing in it.
Yep.
It's like, shit, man. It's like, yep, Tried telling you guys, but you guys didn't want to hear it. Like,
yeah, we tried telling you at 16,000. We tried telling you at 20 something thousand. I think what we hit 70 before it kind of, I would say stalled for a little while before taking off to 100. Like when are you going to listen? When it reaches 1 million, when it reaches 10 million, like, boy, I don't know. We should probably hit the show opener and start kicking it. It's 9:09.
We should,
Bitcoin
because I want
veterans.
to get some new coffee too. So definitely.
Hold on to your butts. Hey, this is Bitcoin Veterans. I'm your host, Shane Hazel. I have Mike Hobart, who has stepped away to get some coffee. We've got a hell of a show for you tonight. This is Bitcoin Veterans. It's very self-explanatory. It's Bitcoiners, and we are also veterans. We are here to put you on the mission. This is all about getting the people who love this country, America and America only. Hey, listen, we're here for the rest of the world too. Don't get me wrong. That is the Bitcoin revolution. But to take all those guys that went out once upon a time, signed their name to a line that said, "You can have my entire life, and I will serve this country and do it with honor." This is for those guys that got a little bit jaded and is now turning around as a little bit of retribution and a callback to what we thought America was in the first place, which I'm excited to tell, man, because I think now that we're starting to see it, and I think we're seeing it a lot earlier than a lot of us expected. I am absolutely on fire right now for what's going on. You guys, if you missed the pre-show, I highly recommend you go back and listen to that earlier on, because we got into some fun stuff. But we've got a great show for you tonight. Mike, I don't know where you want to start off, man, but I'll tell you what grabbed my attention when you sent it over was this You Said story. That jumped right out at me, and I was like, "Oh, I know." Anytime you've got charities out there, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, NGOs that are doing what we're seeing here. This is from the Gateway Pundit. You said officials issue stunning order to remaining staffers: shred and burn all the documents, including the classified ones. Boy, that seems. It's
like, what do you guys do with classified documents? First of all.
Yeah, you're NGOs, for God's sakes. Do they have clearances?
I mean, I guess NGOs could have clearances. I mean, Starlink employees do, right?
Yeah, maybe some, but I imagine that if you were to really look, let's just say it was transparent. You could pull up a PDF and see who's where and what's going where and doing what and all these things like this.
Why do these guys have Q clearances? That's what I'd be asking. Like, what are all these non-governmental organizations like? Why are they getting Q clearances? Like, that shouldn't be possible.
If you don't speak veteran and you don't know what a Q clearance is the highest of high clearances, right? You've got you've got classified, you've got secret, you got top secret, you got TS, in terms of silos, and then you get a little further up into Qs, and then that's one of those
this is a thread that's going to be fun to watch people pull on, because this is also sport. Yeah, they're just the CIA. That's exactly where I was going, actually, right. Montani. Because like the funny thing is, I think I told you guys, was it 2 weeks ago now? Like, because we didn't have one last week, right? Was I've been digging into that book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs.
Right.
And he detailed the whole, like, how the Nazi SS learned. They're like, oh, we need a secondary or additional lines of revenue to be able to fund our operations. So what we're going to do is we're going to spin up some spin-off kind of offshoot companies to generate our own revenue for specifically the Nazi SS. And that's the exact roadmap or strategy that the CIA adopted with The OSS adopted, which they built off of the Nazi like war planning of this strategy. So the Nazis figured this out first. They're getting lines of revenue for all the SS special operations. I can't remember the name of it because it's a number of German different words, and I don't speak German.
No Sprika.
Yeah, no Sprika Deutsch. But so the Nazis were doing it first, and then the OSS got spooled up. I can't remember who led it, but Alan Dulles and everything like led it into the CIA, and then they really kind of exploded it out with Operation Underworld and Operation Gladio. Now, like the cool thing is going to be when they start realizing that a lot of these NGOs had clearances, maybe not Q clearance, but had top secret, and I can't remember the other levels higher. That they're going to be like, well, why do these NGOs have these security clearances? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like,
and who got them for it?
Yeah, and like, because there's a bunch of actual black ops NGOs that probably shouldn't be existing. And like I say, probably facetiously, they absolutely shouldn't be existing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to start finding out even more of all this, like these kind of underground black ops / wet work / smuggling like operations. And then they're gonna keep pulling on it, and then they're gonna find more of the drug trade, which has actually been facilitating the opioid epidemic through the pharmaceutical companies like the Koch brothers and the the other family that starts with an S. I can't think of the strict. I can't remember it. But anyway, they're gonna keep pulling on these threads, right? Keep pulling on these threads, and they're gonna find this like nasty, disgusting spider web of illegal government-funded operations, and that's going to tie into the military branches. And so it's already tying into the health sector. It's going to tie into food with Monsanto and Bayer. It's like
it's everything.
It's literally everything. It's funny because like you try and talk about this stuff with normies, and they're like, "You're a literal quack job. You're the guy with all the stuff on his backboard back here with all the strings tied and everything." And like I'm literally that meme right now.
Well, when you figure out how to look at the world through the same lens and who owns everything to begin with, because hey, banks and usury and all the stuff that comes with everything that we've talked about in the past,
shoes,
shoe companies. Yeah, you get to that point and you're just like, damn, man. And the thing is it's not just that they have their hooks in through things like government funding through NGOs, and you said it's that literally BlackRock owns a large majority share of most of the companies that are out there, like the controlling share. And so if they own the controlling share of investment, and they own, I should say, and they are also funded through these NGOs, you're talking about literally unfunded or unlimited funding. And that is the wild thing. It's like, well, what do we need this year? What do you need this? I mean, and the thing is, there's so much extra that they're putting on the backs of every taxpayer for now. I know taxpayers are getting pretty tired of being called taxpayers and funding all these ridiculous things. I think, the wild thing now is this has gotten out of hand for all of these
decades.
People. Yeah. And here's the thing is, I don't think jails within the next 4 years under Trump are going to be filled with these people who are, part of the USAID or the CIA. There's not been any arrests made. We've not gotten any documents. There's no perp walks. There's no, not one person on the Epstein list has been, brought to justice. I don't expect that's how this is going to happen. I think what has to happen and what's going to continue to happen is just this distrust and distaste and just, forthrightness until these guys have to get violent. And I'll tell you what, that's what, kind of worries me, man, is like, and I say worry and say that in one hand, it doesn't really worry me because there's a lot of extra Americans with their guns than there are these idiots. But to say that, these guys aren't going to start doing things where, violence is more of their, Gestapo type of technique. It's like, that's where these guys are going to be left, because they're not going to be able to do anything. Nobody's going to be able to be part of this because everything's going to be found out, because things like X and hopefully as people get on Nostr, these things are just going to be out there and there's no stopping it.
Yeah, I'll go as far as to say it does worry me, because like we're in kind of like these number of different echo chambers where like you and me and like our chat and everybody that consistently watches us and like those that we follow and follow us on like X in particular, we all like see it, but we all don't consider how much of the rest of like, we'll just say the American population doesn't see it.
Right.
And how like once those measures start to get deployed and kicked off, like I don't know if you guys have looked around, but the US is a flipping powder keg right now.
Yeah.
And it continues to become more and more of a powder keg. Like at work, we got into an interesting, like kind of like heated discussion between like providing military aid to Ukraine and like the whole back and forth of like, well, why is Trump demanding all of this like mineral rights stuff for Ukraine? It's like, dude, we gotta like at least make it make sense economically for us. If we're gonna support somebody like Ukraine, I don't think we should be, but if we're going to, we have to make it make sense, right? Because like an article that I wrote years back, the people pleaser paradox, like if like you don't just keep giving to charity and just giving away everything that you're worth, because then like if you're somebody who's useful, who you can provide good service, if you like sacrifice so much of yourself to the point of where you make yourself a charity case, who the fuck are you helping at that point? Nobody. Like you're literally just contributing to the problem. And I think that if those Gestapo type measures were kicked off right now, I think that there's so much confusion and chaos. It wouldn't be good for really any side, in my opinion. I think it would kick off so many different reactions that we'd be able to figure out how to like turn it into like a positive eventually. But like I think the fear and the panic would spread so quickly that like there's a lot of stuff you can't really plan for as far as contingencies. Because like the thing that a lot of people I think the thing that contributes to a lot of people's fears, and that like you and I in particular are not like we're briefed up on since we've been digging through like a lot of like the buried aspects of our history, is that people think that during World War II, America was like the shining beacon of freedom and honor that like we were sold on as far as propaganda. But then you dig through a lot of these aspects of history, it's like we were as big a pieces of shit back then as we are now. It's just that, like it was like the signal.
We had concentration camps too, and you don't get told that in school. Like you don't get taught that there was Japanese internment camps inside of the United States during World War II.
Yeah,
not to mention all the other bullshit that we did. But like, hey, maybe lead with that, you know?
The point is that like it creates a problem because people are judging like. Let's take it like a scientific study. Like people are thinking that because we have the example provided to us by our textbooks about World War II activities for the Americans, they think that that's a control group.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. We don't know that that's not they don't know it's not a control group because it's not the shining beacon of exemplary activity that they thought it was, because they don't have all the information, but they're ignorant to the fact that they don't have all the information. So they're developing a position of arrogance out of their own ignorance and their naivete. So like people like they can't fathom that. And that's the problem with law of large numbers and populations and people, is that it's an aggressive bell curve distribution of intelligence. And the fiat hamster wheel makes it worse because people they don't have the time or the energy or the funding to support a lifestyle of where they can afford to dig into that stuff if they have the interest. Right.
I think you make a really interesting point. I think it is a good segue. I'm not doing these in any particular order, but if a segue is going to bring us into this, I think you're extremely right. Is like people in the bell curve, right? Is when you have centralized education, you literally are going to bell curves are going to exist and they're going to be exaggerated.
Yeah.
Patrick Webb out there at Real Patrick Webb put breaking out here a little while ago. Its Department of Education employees have been instructed to vacate the building by 6 p.m. today, per the memo. That is March 11th. It is dated March 11th at 3:41 p.m. So I imagine those guys are outside the office now. And I think, to your point is, this is a huge development. If this is actually going down and the Department of Education, at least at the federal level, is no longer, I mean, I'd like to get your thoughts, but what I think is, this is that this is that duality, where you've got maybe something worse lined up if they've figured out that they want to close down the Department of Education, or hopefully there's some decentralization. My hope is it's decentralization, decentralization down to the state, down to the county, and then hopefully down to the family. But I also could see the other side of this where, you've got, this idea that the brick and mortar type of education system for the 21st century is just not going to work. It's not producing what they need. They need smarter people. They need people who can do more things that they need them to do. And it's more of a re-education, and the way they'll do it is through artificial intelligence. They'll do it through, this, larger, it's easier to implement, I should say. It's much easier to implement mass education through these things than it is by putting kids on a bus, taking them to a brick and mortar type of building, and then filling their heads full of gobbledygook all damn day, and then sending them back home. Like that infrastructure and that behemoth, they could get a lot more bang for their buck if they get rid of the administration, take that same money and put it into, the AI aspect of actually indoctrinating kids. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the structure of the American education system from top down is completely antithetical to its entire purpose nowadays.
Yeah.
Like if you're actually trying to educate kids, like when you're looking at literal children, the way to teach boys and girls, but more specifically boys, because of their genetics and their predisposition to not sit still, like the American classroom is not the way to like teach kids at all. And it's definitely not to pack them like sardines into some crappy little building with teachers where the majority of them are just trying to like earn a paycheck and they don't actually care about being good teachers. Because if they did, I think if the majority of our teachers in America really did care about being good teachers, they would have side hustles of where they're writing and they're doing podcasts and they're doing all this other stuff to learn how to communicate better to their particular target audience and to be able to structure things in Eli 5 manner. Because I agree with people, like, if
can you explain Eli 5 manner?
Explain like I'm 5. So like, and like this is probably one of the best memes out there, because I do agree that if you can't explain something to, say, a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old, if you can't figure out a way to explain it, you don't know it well enough yet. And that's coming from someone where when I interact with kids, and I guarantee that when I become a father, I'm going to be trying to teach a 3-year-old how to think about astrophysics, because I think it's fascinating, and I want to be able to see that spark of intrigue of the kid. Now the hard part is figuring out when you can have these particular conversations with kids, right? And how to line the different partitions up to prepare them for those conversations.
Yeah,
that's a lot of strategy and foresight and planning and just research that, again, to what I said earlier on my little mini rant, is people don't have the time for that. Right.
Well, I think people prioritize time differently. Right. And that's one of those things where, being one of those guys that's tried to live my principles, right. As a guy who homeschools, as a guy who homesteads, all that fun stuff. I think it's mostly a matter of, well, how are you going to make this happen? And a lot of people don't want to sacrifice an income stream to do it. And so, but to your point though, I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head there, is when you want to talk to your kid about astrophysics, man, having the kids that I do, and I think which one I'm talking about, where I have these incredible conversations and have had these incredible conversations with these guys since they were, just little kids.
Yeah, you got a bunch of little geniuses running around your house. I'm pretty jealous, actually.
Well, I mean, it's the thing is they're interested in this stuff. If you can present it in a, this fantastic way, right? Which how bad is government indoctrination that they can't do this, right? It's what we are and how we exist. And we can kind of get into this ephemeral type of talk for a few minutes. Everybody loves this. We'll get away ephemeral and we'll bring it back to reality. But to take little kids and sit them down and talk to them about being these amazing electromagnetic beings with spiritual, connection to time and space, which is unlimited. You start to put in your head, that, or in their head, that they're literally superheroes. And when you talk to kids that have, this idea that they're superheroes and have superpowers, and they're just, as they get older and they begin to understand these and interact with them, they're going to be able to do amazing things for not only themselves but society and their communities as they grow up. And I think this is one of those things where, this is not done on purpose. Because if you had a bunch of little kids who started thinking for themselves when they were about 3 years old, and they had these imaginations that nobody crushed, and that,
I wish I had that.
right? Like, if you have these kids that have amazing imaginations that don't know how to, fail, right? Hey, failing is okay. And I should say not know how to fail, but know how to fail quickly, but learn the lesson from failure, and are encouraged. Go fail a bunch.
And it's not failure. It's just rehearsal.
Right. Yeah. These are lessons. And so they're not ready to deal with that kind of population. They're not, society. Well, I shouldn't say that the powers that on high, they don't want those kind of kids. And this is why it's so incumbent, why I think, this revelation, that Thomas Massie first put forth, right? Like Thomas Massie first put forth the idea in a basically a one sentence bill in the Department of Education. Like he did this when I was running back in 2018.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I used to beat I used to beat the incumbent that I would go and and have debates with over the head with Thomas Massie all the time. And to see a generation to start understanding that this is a possibility within our lifetime, now that the Department of Education at the highest levels is going to be destroyed, if we can continue to decentralize that and then reinstate the mother into the household. And I'm not being chauvinistic, I'm telling you, like, I think this is just one of those proven patterns where a lot of our ancestors got this right. And, you free time up because you're not tax cattle. You don't have to go work for the state. They're not blowing billions and billions of dollars of, taxpayer money on warfare and the MIC and all these sick, child trafficking things. You start to see a different type of generation appear that is going to be absolutely unstoppable, because they are going to have time, and they are going to have wealth, and they are going to have, these ideas that they're going to, know how to bring to fruition. And that includes becoming a Kardashev 1 type of civilization. And that's not out of, the 21st century. That could be literally late 21st century if we're going to be moving at the rate we're talking about. According to Saylor, in the next 48 months, we're going to be, in terms of Bitcoin, the largest stock cap, quote unquote, the largest market cap out there. Like, you guys better buckle up. I don't think anybody really understands. Like, if we're here and nobody expected to be here in 2025 under Trump, dude, the amount of, gameship that's happening right now, like, or game theory, people just don't understand this at all.
No, absolutely not. I mean, like, just from your own little rant right there, like, that's an amalgamation of difficult discussions around complex systems.
Yeah.
And every one of those individual complex systems and difficult discussions are turnoffs for the majority of the population. Because all of us autists here in this conversation that are listening or partaking, we enjoy thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we enjoy like the kind of mental workout of like trying to understand something complex and then getting your mind blown once everything clicks together and you're like, oh shit, this is really cool. Most people don't like that. Most people don't want, they don't find, they don't
my still pond alone. I don't need any ripples.
Yeah. They don't get the dopamine hit like we do. Like, they're
Right.
like, no, like, I just want to have sex, have good food, and maybe watch some movies or do something like relatively comfortable the majority of the time. Right. But yeah, like, there's like early on in your tangent, like, I really liked the comment on, it's clearly intentional that they're not educating and sparking inspiration in these kids. Like, it's not hard. And that's something that I've really kind of pounded the table about for like last 10 years, like especially when I was back in the army. I was like, how are you guys not obsessed with like any aspect of science? Like, how are you not obsessed with physics? How are you not obsessed with like I hated chemistry in college, but now that I understand it, how are you not obsessed with like the fact like so like I was sharing a couple months ago, I was sharing with Melanie, her son. I was telling him how the body how it even goes from the point of you thinking about moving any aspect of your body to the point of moving. Like let me tell you guys real quick. When you think about like just moving your finger, like if you're gonna like just raise your index finger, the thought of moving the index finger, which travels in a matter of nanoseconds, sends a propagation signal down through all the musculature to release calcium to prepare the body for moving if you decide to move it. That's the first thing that happens. And then afterwards, you decide to move it. Then it sends another signal a matter of nanoseconds that releases calcium to change the polarity of the muscle environment to enable for like actual bonding of the actin and myosin heads to allow your muscles to contract and relax that produces that movement. How the fuck does that not blow your mind and like make you want to like learn more about your body?
Yeah.
That's one tiny aspect of what our bodies are doing on a 24/7 basis. And that's just with the body. That's not talking about like what's going on with like farming and all this other stuff. Like, and I'm going to do like a selfish, shameless plug here. I'm like the other thing that I've been working on for the like really the last couple of years, but heavily in the last like 6 months is I've been doing the work to produce a book where I talk about a lot of this stuff and like the stuff that like we're talking about right now, like what Bitcoin is going to be doing to facilitate this second renaissance that I legitimately think we're going through with energy, education, like regenerative agriculture, like all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't understand. How can you not be fascinated by any of this? So, like, again, back to like tying it back in, like the fact that our American education system hasn't been doing this, and the fact that it's not difficult to do, as long as you're like you have 3 brain cells to rub together, tells me in agreement with you that it was intentional. Like,
Oh, yeah. But yeah, the only way only way you bore people out of learning is to subject them to indoctrination for 12 to 13 years of their life, 6 to 8 hours a day, plus homework and all this other bullshit, right? Like that's what they did. That's what they did to the boomer generation. That's what they did to the Generation X. That's what they did to, whatever the Goonies, that I am part of, the millennials, you name of it. Like they've tried it and now it's failing so hard across the board that you just kind of look back and go, geez, man, like what a crazy experiment. Like what a repressive experiment. There's before I get going on that side of it, what you were talking about with like the body and like this idea that you've got this system inside of you that prepares everything for movement and where it needs to be and all of that kind of stuff. It reminds me of mycelium, right? And I would guarantee you, had this been presented to me the way you talk about it in terms of the body, quantum mechanics, I would have been so far down the quantum mechanics rabbit hole as a child, right? Like just a child in terms of how does this all work and why is it important that it does work and how do you interact with this and what does that mean? Like what does it mean to be able to interact, with your body and this planet and quantum mechanics? Like when you start to understand that that's who you are as a human being, like a little human being, like you said, like this whole thing makes you, it gives you superpowers. And when it gives you superpowers as a human race, I think there's a little bit more of a theological discussion here in terms of what the Holy Spirit is. But
we can touch on that later if you want. I gave you something about that, but
when you get into that side of it, right? Is I think many have confused what the Holy Spirit is, and I'll tie this into maybe a little bit of story time here, because you said something about there's a lot of people out there that don't want to know, like they don't want their understanding of what this is, this consciousness. They don't want to know anything different. Like they're comfy, right? Like they're comfy, they're going to live, they're going to die. This is their little plot and they're happy with it. But something has happened. And I say that because I got to have this amazing conversation with a relative of mine. I, won't give any indication of who it was or where it was and all that fun stuff. But I had this really amazing conversation. A relative that I hadn't seen in quite a few years, probably about 5 years, and the 180-degree turn that had happened between the last time we met to this time. We got to sit down and talk about a lot of this kind of stuff. We talked about Bitcoin. We talked about, where, history went awry in terms of, the Bolshevik Revolution, the rise of Hitler and then on to and into America. And then we get into the psychedelic quantum side. And when we as this thing just flowed in, I was like, oh my God. I'm having a conversation with somebody who 5 years ago would have wanted to have me committed to a crazy house, right? Like, and not only are we having this conversation, but we are having this in this profound way, this reconnection within our own family, going, oh my God, like this is literally happening. If this person is doing it, talked to my brother afterwards, and he was like, dude, something has changed out there. Something is changing fast. And I think that is, this uniting, this quantum energy between human beings, where this vibration is rising. I think this is what a lot of people refer to as the Holy Spirit in real life. And like, when that gets to a high enough level, boy,
start humming.
Yeah, things are going to happen. And it's not going to, I'm not saying, we're bringing back the Antichrist and we're going to slaughter the Antichrist and Christ is coming back and all that. Like I'm not that guy. I'm not going to sit here and make predictions about any of that kind of stuff. But I do think, in terms of, you raise the vibration of people enough and you actually bring them together in this unified understanding of what consciousness is. And that does a lot of amazing things for getting rid of the evil and perpetuating the good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask you something and I lost it. Cause I think I've had experiences like that for the last couple of years. And especially a couple individuals within my own family, I've had that. And then people that I was just meeting for the first time in the last 2 years that I expected to be like normies in the sense of they don't want to hear it. Just bringing up they would just bring up how it's it just feels like there's something evil going on. I'm like, yeah, you the ripple went through the ether and jarred everybody. And they're just like, well, hold on. There's something here that I didn't know was here before. Right. I guess, I don't know. I am we're looking at potentially dark ages in the immediate, but I am very, very confident that we are in the early innings of the second Renaissance, and the Renaissance required the dark ages.
I agree.
So because I wrote an article for Bitcoin Magazine a couple years ago about just the market correction, or during the 2020 pandemic, the fear. The only people that weren't scared were the Bitcoiners, because we are on this same kind of vibrational, wavelength. We're like, yeah, it sucks, but everything makes sense to me. So it doesn't really scare me. I'm not about to panic. I'm preparing for the future. And it's funny how what keeps people kind of in their headspace of not wanting to hear it is the fear of responsibility, right? The fear of responsibility that comes from the freedom of what the protocols or the stipulations I was operating within that were very constrictive. Something's not right out here. So I'm going to take upon the freedom of my own to kind of go out into the wilderness and start figuring out what's actually going on. And looking into some of these hidden aspects of history or what have you, or the vaccine stuff, whatever floats your boat, and just kind of realizing the reality. Most people get scared because that means that they have a massive amount of accountability. It's all this stuff has been happening quite literally because none of us wanted to actually dig into it and learn. Right. We didn't want to dig into the stuff that was just oh, you're telling me that that's not true, but you're not giving me the logical reason why.
Yeah.
And I didn't dig into it. So that's my fault. Right. And I think that scares, I think that's primarily what prevents most people. But like this is the other thing too, is like with like because I also have in my book like how what Bitcoin is doing to energy and education and agriculture is it's also going to be doing to relationships and the family. Because it's gonna rebuild like the nuclear family structure. It's gonna reward the male for being the provider, and it's gonna reward the female for staying home and being a proper mom and like raising the kids and all this other stuff. And then that like what that ends up what I'm getting at is that when we go through these dark ages, they are going to be the shared experience that recorrects the political polarity between the male and female populations right now in the Western world, right? Because it's not just the US, it's also over in Europe. It's being shown that where things are right now, young males are predominantly conservative, females are predominantly liberal. And there's a reason for that, right? Because men are the ones that like, if we're going to talk about evolutionary psychology and behavior and biology, men were typically the ones that have to go out and face the world. Like
to create a safe space for the women.
Yeah, exactly. And we love doing it. We have a lot of fun doing it. And
yeah.
And the thing is that if you're doing that, you have to face reality. Because if you're not going to figure out and understand and study and face reality, reality is going to smack you basically off a cliff and you're going to die. That's ultimately what nature does. It's like, hey, if you're not paying attention and you're not learning from your experiences, you're literally going to run off that cliff because because you're completely ignorant and unaware. So we're going to reward the ones that like actually study, pay attention. It's like, okay, this is how you build a house. This is how you build a dam. This is how you turn it into a nice little like mill so you can produce power, all this other stuff. And then the females, like they go predominantly liberal because they are very community focused, right? They get their social power from the community, whether that, and like I had an argument with somebody on Twitter because they didn't understand like what I was saying with this aspect of community is that all of the people around a female, whether it's their enemy or their friend, that's community. Like there's no way of getting around it. Because like you don't know everybody in your city, but it's still your community, and they get their power and their security from the community, right? Like they like the ladies like to come together and gossip about what all their families are doing, so everybody knows what's going on. It's the security mechanism, and then they all help raise each other's kids and everything else. Like there's a lot of benefits to all of it. The problem is that in Western societies right now, we've gotten to this aggressive bifurcation. And because of feminism for the last like 50 plus years.
Oh, and where did that come from?
Yeah.
More shoe salesmen.
More shoe salesmen. Because we're at this interesting state right now. And this is another conversation I had with a friend of mine where there's a lot of reverberation back and forth because we have the political disparity between the male and female populations. But then we've also been leading the young females into trying to basically become men. Like, go get your bag, girlfriend. Like, be that boss babe. It's like, but you can't be the boss babe and a really great mother at the same time because everybody's limited in time and energy and resources. And then we've also been emasculating the males on the other side. So we're almost like driving this like social political like deviation away from the natural norm to the point of where what used to be a bell curve is now an inverse bell curve, especially on the female side. Right? Because you have the inverse bell where the bell curve should be in the middle of like most women are like genuinely feminine. And like on the edges, there's like the little aspy baby girls that are actually really good at being like boss babes and they should do so because that's what they're best at. And then the opposite. Right. Mm-hmm. But instead we have the inverse bell curve of where we have two major extremes. There's the conservative women that are primarily family focused that want to be the stay-at-home moms that want to have like half a dozen kids and all this other stuff. But then we have the exact polar opposite of where we have a ton of single females that don't want to be mothers, that just want to have like 13 cats and just live off of red wine for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Right. And like that society doesn't operate well that way. And that's also causing disruptions within like the family formation and the relationship market, because there's just a lot of different social like triggers that are trying to tell like men like, well, you shouldn't be looking for this, you shouldn't be looking for that. And then telling females it's like, you like, being a mother is not like a justifiable, like honorable pursuit. Like you should want to like make a bunch of money and be independent. It's like, well, but these women are naturally like, I don't want to be independent. Like I want to have a family. And in order to have a family, you have to be kind of dependent on each other in their own like specific to their own sex kind of way. Right.
Yeah.
Fixing the money starts to go back to all of that, because what's the one thing that we talk about with the fiat hamster wheel and suffrage? It's like they didn't really care about the women being independent. They wanted another fucking source of tax revenue.
That's it, man. Yeah.
Like, and then you start fixing all of this slowly, and it's like this is another reason why like the IRS needs to go away.
Give up the greatest role that you will ever have as a mom to go out and compete with men in corporate America. Go wear your pantsuits, sacrifice time you will never get back for fiat money that they print out of nothing.
Yeah. And we're just not going to tell you that you and your daughters and your granddaughters are going to be less desired by the male population, because competing with them is going to put them on the same level as men around them. And guess what? Straight men don't want to marry men.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but it's like, that's what it comes down to. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, I feel like I'm competing with you at the home. I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on what you said kind of early on going into that is, this unification of family, and I think this is something that I don't think we should gloss over. I think this is one of those things where there was a big shift, obviously 2020, 2021, even 2022, I think, where families were just torn apart by this, right? There's fear that was, like there was like guys like me, there's like, dude, have you guys seen the Tuskegee experiment? Like, let me tell you, like what these guys are saying in terms of all this shit is just one of those things that they've done. They did it in the 1980s with AIDS. Like it's the same guy was fucking doing it. And this is not going to end well. And, you had those people who are like, oh, you're just selfish, man. You're like, fuck your, freedom.
Well, yes.
Yeah. Like fuck your freedom of speech. and this was families. Like this is who you're talking to, moms and dads and brothers and sisters and aunt and uncles, all that, like that tore people apart. Not to mention, just the politics in general, but that was a great schism in America. It just absolutely destroyed what was left of families. And, I think we weren't doing great before that with, ridiculous, divorce rates and people that were, losing their jobs because of downturns in the economy and everything else. But what you said was like, Bitcoin is literally going to help unify families again. And to be able to talk about, this side of it where you go, hey man, look, we were all duped. And like, this is, kind of what I talk about in the post-traumatic stress, things that we go through, right? Is like, look, man, like you got taken at 5 years old and you got indoctrinated with weapons grade type of,
literal psychological warfare.
Literally.
Yeah.
That's what they did to everybody in 2020 through 2022. Like, until you saw it and you were like, oh my God, they lied to everybody. And the guys that got the shots, like, yeah, man, like that was all of us. And that's the starting point. When you have that starting point, you can go back to that starting point and then start to heal, because you're like, hey man, also, by the way, that whole thing about money was also a lie, right? Like this idea that you understand money, that was all a lie. And you're the guy that's the Bitcoiner in the family that's not crazy and have been talking to people about this since it was, like I said, in the hundreds of, if not, few thousands of dollars. And they're going like, Jesus Christ, man, like you actually do know something and you look like you got your life together and you got, family and kids and your homeschool and you got one family member at work and you got one family member that's taking care of like that's when people start to see that and they drop their guard a little bit. That's where these inroads come together, man.
Yeah.
And you start to bring, factions of family. They start to say, hey, listen, this is silly. Whatever we were mad about, it was contrived, it was concocted, it was weapons grade manipulation. Like we got to put that aside. We got to heal our family. And I think that is one of the most positive things that Bitcoin is going to do for not only, this country, but for people around the world.
Oh yeah. And like were you the one that recommended the book The Body Keeps the Score?
Yeah. Okay.
No, I thought that was you. So
That's
like I just finished reading it. Or
great book.
reading it Jordan style. I had to listen to an audiobook because
It's a bit thick.
it's a bit thick, but I don't know. I really like, especially when I'm at work, like I'm doing something with my hands. I like listening to something like cognitively loading too. So like one of the most interesting parts of that book is in the latter third of it, where the author is talking about, and this is really important to what you were just talking about. The author is discussing how when children are taught to not listen to their body, and they are taught to that, like, say, like your intuition or your instincts, like say, so like one of my favorite examples is as I was a kid, and there's nothing against my mom for this. It's just she was younger and like unaware. I remember a specific moment where my mother was taking my sister and I to school, and I looked out the window and I saw the moon, and it's like 9 a.m. or whatever, and the moon's up in the sky. I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could see the moon during the day. And my mom goes, you can't. Like, that's not the moon. I'm like, yes, it is. I'm looking at it. It is right there. And she's like, that's not the moon, Michael. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, whatever. And then, so like, but like, that's that example of not necessarily the parent doing the wrong thing, but like of an entire system of teaching kids to not listen to their bodies. Like another example is like, I went to like a Catholic, I think it was a Catholic preschool.
Mm-hmm.
I was allergic to milk as a younger kid. I forced my body to kind of like learn how to tolerate it by just like kind of like with the whole like anti-venom thing. You just increase the dosage a little bit, and then your body's just like, all right, fine. Like, we're not getting away with this. We'll just like adapt to it.
Right.
I was raised in this Catholic preschool where I told the teachers I was allergic to milk. They didn't believe me. They kept forcing me to drink milk. So I was sick all the time. It's like, well, like, what do you expect? Right. Hey, the moon is a psyop. That's all. That's a whole other conspiracy theory we could talk about a different time, man. But like, just like these little kind of events in every child's life of just like, you don't know what you're talking about because you're a kid. You're just a stupid little kid. I'm the adult. I'm going to tell you how the world is. And when you break apart their listening to their own intuition, because kids aren't dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you and I both know this. Like, kids are
and they're also far more connected than we are.
Yeah, they're far more connected. They're extremely intuitive. Like, you watch a kid just like kind of like you watch the cogs just like working, and they'll start to figure some stuff out that you probably didn't want them to figure out yet. But the big thing is like when you start injecting something in between their cogs of where they're working with the real world, and you're telling them that what they're seeing or feeling or interacting with isn't real or isn't accurate, you start to dissociate themselves from their own bodies. So like, and what I'm getting at, what this whole tangent is about, is that it when you break that relationship inside of an individual where they're not listening to intuition and they're not listening to their bodies and they're not aware of their bodies and their intuition and all these other, you start to break them listening to these signals, then there's an interesting thing that the author describes in in The Body That Keeps the Score, or The Body Keeps the Score. Like you guys listening, you need to go like understand this book, especially if you're somebody that has extreme like trauma. Like I actually texted Ryan Mata and I was like, hey, have you read this book? Because this is extremely important for your topic around child trafficking. Like, it discusses like some of the major contributing factors to a lot of these problems that like these kids are going to have down the road. And he's looking into it now. But it's important to understand like what these little things do to a kid's mind and how it carries on into adulthood. People don't know how to listen to their bodies, which is wild in its own right. Like, people don't know the difference between, like, most of you guys listening, I bet, don't know the difference between a muscle soreness and an injury. Like, most people don't know how to differentiate the two signals, which is terrifying because that's something that you are living within and you don't even understand the own signals your body's telling you. Extrapolate that to outside the body. anything that is logical or critical thinking that is happening outside of them, if they don't know how to receive that information and filter it and understand what it means, they don't know how to critically think at all. They're not aware of their surroundings in any manner. Because like another example too is like when you've been working out consistently for a while, your body becomes more sensitive to certain kinds of signaling, right? Like you can identify when you're low on blood sugar, when you need carbohydrates. But one of the other things is that you start to build a stronger connection with your sensory system, like your skin. So like you can literally walk into a wave of humidity and know that it's more like the area that you're in is more damp than the area you were just in.
Mm-hmm.
Or like walking through a wave of heat. Like you can pick that up. Most people in Western society, they're numb to all these different signals. And then they start to get exposed to this stuff. And then like it's overstimulated. It's like in Man of Steel when Clark Kent is like getting his Superman powers. He's overstimulated and he's like freaking the fuck out in classroom, right? Like that's most people. So like in like getting back to like the core kind of like topic, it's a great night for rants. Getting back to the core topic of like fixing the family unit and fixing the education system are the two biggest things we can do for our kids and our grandkids that nobody besides Bitcoiners was really interested in my opinion.
I love it. And I've been talking a lot to my middle son about this recently.
Yep.
When we talk about, healing the family and really healing society, and I think it starts off with like healing yourself, right? And a lot of people, listen, I was that guy, man. Like I went through a couple of pretty intense battles, small ones, Najaf and Fallujah overseas, back in 2004. And I was this extremely high functioning guy, especially when I got out. And like, I just was like, no, fuck that. That's weakness. I don't have trauma. I don't have any, like, fuck that stuff. And I wouldn't let myself even think it, right? I was like, you're not going to be able to, right? Trauma does something to you that I don't think most people understand. And I'm going to share something with you guys now. And I think, this will take us a minute too, because I think this is a great way to help you guys out there, help yourselves. This is kind of a map. It's Dr. David Hawkins. It's his map of consciousness. And it makes perfect sense once you spend a little bit of time with it. When you are traumatized, a lot of times, you're going to, operate in the survival paradigm. If you guys are looking at the screen right now, I'll kind of just describe this chart to anybody who's just listening. At the bottom of the survival paradigm, this is what we're talking about in terms of low energy, low vibration, right? And this is all, in terms of, documented.
New words.
I'm making up new words, my man. I was going to say something else, but this is all documented in terms of resonancy of, when you're measuring a person's, vibration, you can actually see these things, and they've done these studies, at least Dr. Hawkins did. When you're traumatized, there are things like shame and guilt and apathy and grief and fear and desire and anger and pride that all, in that order are what you feel. And it's really easy if you've got something like this in front of you or around your home for, not only yourself, but for maybe your family to see, to be like cognizant of like, where am I at right now? Where am I at in terms of, the level of consciousness that I'm at? How do I feel right now? And if you're below that courage line, in that anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, or shame, that's low vibration. And this is what we've got to get human beings out of. This is where trauma lives and trauma thrives. If you can start to get yourself just to the idea of courage, and then what I talk to my kids about is if you can find the courage to take a breath, take a pause, and maybe even say a prayer, like start putting positive energy into the world and being grateful. This is, that step up. It actually puts you from courage into acceptance. And so this is where reason and integrity falls in from Dr. Hawkins. This corridor, reason to integrity or courage, is acceptance and willingness and neutrality. And if you can get there from courage, say a prayer, all of a sudden you're at acceptance. And this is raising your vibration. Now, if you can be grateful during these prayers and start to, focus on these ideas that you love your family, you're grateful for your family, there are memories that you have that, bring you joy. Now you're getting into the spiritual paradigm, and this is extremely high vibration. People who live mostly in the spiritual paradigm, or at least above, the courage paradigm, like this is where you start to change not only your world, but the people around you's world, and then your community. And depending now, if you've got voices like this, where you can actually reach out on a platform and help people raise their vibration for love and joy and peace and possibly even enlightenment, what you're doing is literally what we're talking about. Is you're not only healing yourself, which is I think where all this stuff has to begin. You're going to start healing other people in these states. And if you have these type of maps around in your house or your place of work, where you can actually point to where you're at and figure out where you need to be, man, it's a shortcut. You're not going to be, angry for hopefully an entire day. You can shortcut this. You can, and that's where I think a lot of us are. It's not so much there is some grief, I imagine, with some of us, but the shame and the guilt and all that kind of stuff, it fades away, and you get into a higher resonance. You put that stuff away, and now you can start to do incredible things for your community. And if it's the Bitcoin community, if it's your church community, if it's the economic community that you live in, whatever that is, man, that's you're going to be a high vibration force for something that's going to set not only you apart, but set your community apart. And that's exactly where I think what you said earlier is like Bitcoin's going to heal a lot of these things. And I think Bitcoiners understand this a lot more than most people out there that even go to church on Sundays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Damn. We took this conversation on a wild path.
Yeah, welcome Bitcoin veterans, where we'll start with current events and get into some fairly deep stuff.
Yeah, I freaking love it. But one thing that I've been wanting to ask you is actually, so I kind of like changing tunes and like resetting the conversation. I saw on Twitter today that in the last like 24, 36 hours, a lot of opinion sharing on Massie. Was there something that happened with Massie recently? Because I haven't seen it.
We should probably get into this. It is the title of the show.
Yeah.
Donald Trump. You guys might know who he is. He's the president of the United States now. I know it's a kind of Donald J. Trump. He's
never heard of him.
The United States. True Social, I don't know who's still using that besides him, but Congressman Thomas Massie, this is from Donald Trump. He says, Congressman, in quotation, boy, that's fun. This is the first time I picked that up. No, he's actually a congressman. Thomas Massie voted to delay the debt ceiling bill from the Biden administration to the Trump administration from September before the election to June after the election, without getting anything of this horrendously stupid move when Republicans could have gotten everything they wanted. He additionally voted to delay the current budget disaster from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. I was running for office at the time, doing my thing, and when I heard about this, it was quite simply hard to believe. A catastrophic mistake. He goes on. Basically, he wants Congressman Thomas Massie primaried. The congressman,
because of this debt ceiling bill?
Well, not only that, but he's not willing to vote. Congressman Thomas Massie isn't willing to vote now for the continuing resolution that the Republicans are saying that is theirs, which is not. And this is a beautiful thing about Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie comes out, does a live video earlier, and explains this all to the T. This is the continuing resolution that is left over from the Biden administration. This is literally Biden-era spending. So the same stuff that, the Doge committees are out there saying, hey, listen, this is waste, fraud, and abuse, corruption, even treason. And the Republicans right now are all mad at Massie. And I'm not saying it's all of them. Actually, there's a huge swath of the MAGA population that's like, now Trump has jumped the shark with this.
which is good.
Yeah. That is a huge improvement. It's not just, hey, we're following along. MAGA's going, hey, listen, if Trump strays from MAGA, that's his choice, but we're MAGA. And guess what? Thomas Massie is definitely make America great again, right? Like Massie is like America only, which is the way it should be for all of these guys. He's put forth the idea, I think, that there shouldn't be any dual citizens in office to begin with. So anyway,
absolutely, I agree with that.
He gets up there and he starts talking about this as this is Biden spending, and Trump is now saying that he wants this to happen. And all these other congressmen under, Speaker Johnson, who's an absolute Israeli sellout to begin with, need this to happen. Yeah. Right. So all the stuff that was earmarked to go to Israel that's what they're going to push. They're going to push all that money towards Israel again, and all the other, waste, fraud, and corruption, which always, what you talked about earlier, it all comes back to those shoe salesmen. And you're just sitting there going like, what? They like, right. So not only that, but now Congressman Johnson is dismissing the House to go on leave. Like, hey, get out of here. That means that when it goes over to the Senate, this is a done deal already. And they've already got the Democrats on board to sign off on this continuing resolution. So if they're not worried about it, that's exactly what you would do. You would dismiss the entire House of Representatives because the Senate's just going to pass it. And they know they've got the votes. It's a done damn deal. The fact that Thomas Massie is calling it out, that's what they're pissed about. And if memory serves correctly, I think that this happened during Trump's first administration, where he attacked Massie, tried to primary Massie, and Massie blew the doors off of the challenger, even given, man, Northern Kentucky loves this guy. There's a reason. And I will tell you, Thomas Massie was a guy that got me, I think, really interested in running politics. When I found out that I saw Thomas Massie at like a 99% like constitutional voter, like you got one mandate only. Go up there, understand the Constitution, support the bills that are in line with the Constitution, and
defend the people,
and defend everybody's rights. Like that's your goal. In terms of everybody else up there, like everybody else is maybe a B at best. Most people, even within the Republican Party, are like D's and F's in terms of supporting the Constitution. So when it comes to a guy that has repeatedly been America first and America only, and he's voted in line with the Constitution, which not only means, protecting your rights, but running the government per its, contract, like he's the guy. Donald Trump, man, he's blown it with this one.
Well, I mean, it's funny because like, it is an example of how, regardless of who gets in office, they're trying to just do the same shit that the prior group did. It's like, oh yeah, we're wiping out all this stuff with Doge and USAID, but just keep it all going with this one. It's like, dude, come on, get the fact that I think that we're also like through that we're getting a lot of signal that a lot of people, again, off of our tangents from earlier, are getting jarred awake, and like there's ripples going through the ether. It's like, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're not gonna keep like placating and just like, so the good thing is the more that these waves crash over of like these waves of outrage crash over through social media and X and everything else over people doing the right thing like Thomas Massie, it's going to jar more people awake, and they're going to like start realizing it's like, hey, maybe this entire system really does need to be rethought.
Yeah, burn to the ground, decentralize, and let's just start over. Let's figure out what we need locally, and then come up from there. I think that's the way to do it, and I think the world will be a lot better. And some people will be like, "Oh, you're missing it," like in terms of defense and everything else. Listen, we can provide for the common defense. Like there's 500 plus million guns in America. There's guys with backhoes and tractors and like, listen. When you watch what men from Appalachia can do up in Western North Carolina in a matter of days, and turning literally moving mountains, and then getting supply chains going through X and all these church networks and everything else, not to mention the veterans networks that were up there, like I have no doubt in my mind that this is the last place you want to be as America unfucks itself trying to create trouble, right? Like,
yeah,
those guys get handled. And this system, it's I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about what's happened in this past week in terms of let's just call it the JQ out there in terms of some people making some extremely large waves. We had Ian Carroll on Joe Rogan.
That was a good one.
Yeah, we had I think what was it?
Laura Loomer's a big one, and I don't like her at all.
I can't stand her, but hey, you know what? She said partly some smart things that were going on. You had Candace Owen, who went on Theo Vaughn, and then I think it was the Tate brother that went on with Hodge Twins, right? Like these are massive audiences, and you're talking about millions and millions and millions, probably tens of millions at this point. That this has gotten out, and that this is changing the entire narrative right now, and there is a big problem with support for anybody who's not America right now. And the biggest one that we're all seeing, what the Trump administration has funded up to $17 billion in his first couple months alone after turning off, the waterworks over there in Ukraine, is Israel. Like, to see that, boy, you look at it and you go, man, I think everybody's starting to like the tide is turning. The tide is definitely moving in our direction, and that's a big problem for a lot of those guys.
The interesting thing, or again, I don't like Laura Loomer, but I think that like the way that she, like, specifically the clip that I saw of her from her podcast, of the way she talked about it, is like one of the most important types of messaging that we need out there. Because like she structured it the same way that we talk about it. It's like, hey, well, her voice is a little bit bigger. Like, she's got like however many millions of followers, but she's also the fact that she's Jewish, and she's like, hey, I'm Jewish, and I'm over here like, why the fuck do we have all these like people in executive and leadership positions that are Jewish, that are making all of these decisions that are not in America's best interest? Like, she's like, I'm not promoting any anti-Semitism. I'm raising some questions. It's like there's a common thread here amongst all of them, and we need to start figuring out why.
Yeah.
Right. Because like the one thing that I'm at the point now where I don't want to see JD Vance become president after Trump. I'd rather see Massie, because like one of the thing that I don't like right now is, so I actually had the capability of going on to our spaces this morning, and we were talking macro, and this is actually some stuff I wanted to talk about a little bit anyway. And put on your doom caps, guys, on, because I'm going to go on a little doom rant. But like, so like one of the things that I don't like about JD Vance and Trump right now is that they're very strategically pounding the war drum of going against Iran.
Yeah.
And that is not some nonsense that we really like want or need. And like one thing that we had actually talked about a couple of days ago, Shane, is that markets are kind of panicking right now, right? Like, I'm sure everybody has seen, like, the markets are selling off, Bitcoin's selling off, gold is actually selling off. And you watch and you look at it, you can start comparing a lot of these charts, and the money is rotating out of what is deemed as risk and moving into the more kind of like safe investments. Like, money is moving into bonds, and money is moving into stuff like utilities, like water and like gas and everything, stuff that is going to like have to be consumed by the general populace, regardless of whether it's a recession or not. And one of the many different reasons why markets are getting spooked is that, so like, I think we're both the same vein. Like, I think we're both confident that World War III is official. Like, it's been going, right? The problem that we're running into, that I've noticed, is that the majority of people are assuming that World War III is going to look like World War II.
Oh yeah.
It's not.
Not.
Not only is telecommunications going to change the way that World War III is going to look, but so is technological evolution, like drones. So like, let's just take a quick kind of like assessment of what we've got going on right now. We've got the Ukraine-Russia war, which has been going on since 2022, right? We have Syria that has been going on for basically fucking ever, which is now ramping up and is kind of joining the Israel-Iran environment of seeming to produce, like, they're trying to, like, it seems like things are starting to develop into a holy war over in the Middle East and North Africa. And Europe is getting roped into it with all their immigration stuff. Like, if you guys haven't been watching that, there's a lot of animosity being drudged up between the Christian groups and the Muslim groups.
Yep.
And Europe, I don't know how many of you guys are experienced with like Europe cultures. The funny thing is that the world got convinced that the US is the most racist population. It is not. Europe is very racist. And so is Africa, and so is Asia. The rest of the world is
super duper fucking racist, man.
The rest of the world is far by orders of magnitude more racist than the US is.
And more homogenous for a reason.
Yeah. And so like we've got Russia, Ukraine, we've got Iran, Israel, and Syria. Turkey is kind of like signaling like they're going to get involved. Egypt is part of that because everyone's trying to figure out where the Palestinian people are going to go. And Egypt was like, no, we built a wall for a reason. We're not going to take them. Africa is going full on racist against anybody that has lack of melanin in their skin, especially down in South Africa.
South Africa for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then now we've also got, and then don't forget about China and Taiwan. Like China's being very strategic, like much more strategic than I gave them credit for, of just kind of like letting all this stuff spark off. And then they're going to subsume Taiwan while everybody else is freaking out around the world. But the other thing that we also have to take into account is that I think we like what our position of the U.S. military of like classifying the cartels as terrorist organizations so we can send the U.S. military into Mexico looks like a soft invasion to me. I'm not saying we're necessarily like
I 100% agree with you.
I'm not necessarily saying that we're going like full Hitler and just like taking Mexico, but it is a foot in the door for establishing Mexico as part of our territory or a protectorate or whatever. Now, that sounds really bad as far as like it makes America look bad.
Mm-hmm.
But what people need to understand is that the reason why we classified the cartels as terrorist organizations so we could send the military in is because we have had evidence that suggests the Chinese Communist Party is supporting the cartels by flooding them with fentanyl, which is flooding up into the U.S., which is contributing to the opioid epidemic. Separate from the opioid epidemic being fed by the CIA with Big Pharma in defending the opium fields out in Afghanistan. Right. And that's all kind of like part of the same thing. Now, I think that like all of those things coming together, I think this is what is making up World War III right now.
Yeah.
Because effectively every hemisphere is in war of some form or fashion. It's not all directed on the European continent like World War II was and World War I, but everybody is going to be touched by this.
Yeah. And I don't think we should discount the fact that they kicked this off. And we could say they kicked this off over 20 years ago, but like they really kicked off the kinetic side of this with the vaccine. I mean, they literally slaughtered millions, hundreds of millions of people. Like this past go around in 2021, 2022, with people dying off and still dying off from a vaccine, what quote unquote out there, man. Like, no, that didn't happen. Like they literally went after people, and we all know who owns all that. And the thing is man, a lot of this points back to the same people we've been talking about for a long time. And it's one of those things where I think you're right, Mike. I think, World War III is in full swing, and it's just extremely different than anybody ever thought it was going to be. The old saying that, I don't know what, World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. And and
that's why we have to be careful. Like we have to get everybody as educated as possible. So like, emotions don't get so overcharged as we carry things into even further extremes that they don't need to go to.
That's right.
Because like the interesting thing as well is that I like to rely on looking at the progression from the World War I into the Roaring 20s, into the Great Depression, into World War II, as a kind of like roadmap or example of like what's going on. And we've seen that just like much more condensed into like basically a decade of like that progression. And part of that's going to be because of, like I said, telecommunications. Information is sharing faster, which means reactions are happening faster, which means fixes and problems are also occurring faster. The interesting thing, though, is that because of fiat currency, because during World War I and World War II, we didn't have the Bretton Woods Agreement, and we didn't have all other world currencies floating against the US dollar, and we didn't break the dollar from the gold peg until the 70s, we're in a situation now where, like, we're in World War III. There's nobody to bail us out of a depression or a recession, because that's kind of what countries did for a while. Is like, if a trade partner ran into a recession or depression, it's like, hey, we'll buy up like $1 billion or $1 trillion of your debt and help you out because we're reliant upon you. We're now in a situation where there's nobody that can facilitate that kind of like safety net. And so we're seeing this kind of economic recession, but it's not being reflected in the stock markets because everybody's got, like, they're allowed to do share buybacks. So they just fluff their own numbers. And like this actually goes back to like this also continues to perpetrate the class warfare, right? Because the elites are like just buying back their own shares and like literally jerking themselves off and like making themselves in each other more money, while the bottom 99% continue to get poorer and poorer and poorer. And like that increases emotionality and anger. And they're like, no, we're going to burn your, we're going to the Rothschilds for the rescue. Oh God. Don't even get me started on that. But
it back full circle, Mike, and like what we started out the podcast with, you got Michael Saylor saying in the next 48 months that, Bitcoin is going to eclipse the market cap of gold, which means it's going to be number one, which is exactly in terms of there's nobody else to bail anybody else out. Like this, the resources, the entire thing is absolutely going to have to be scrapped. And so if the entire thing has to be scrapped, and we're in this late stage, I won't call this capitalism, but this is centrally controlled banking manipulation, right? Yeah, like this late stage fiat universe that we've been living in, man, it's toast. And for society to go on, especially at a global economic level, you have to have global economic money. And the only thing that's going to do that on a network that's already built, that has layers upon layers, is going to be Bitcoin. And then the amazing thing about that is we've got other technology emerging for communication, like Nostr, that is going to help that as well. Which, man, as we continue to go, I think there's going to be also hopefully decentralized companies coming up with their own, low Earth orbit type of satellites in terms of actually carrying the signal, because Musk has proven it now, but that's obviously centralized. The next step is to decentralize that as well.
China's already built a Challenger 2 Starlink with operations going live for 30 countries in Africa.
Yeah.
But like one thing I wanted to rope it back after like the doom rant, to get it back to not only topics we discussed, but like also get into some bullishness, is that so like the thing that fixes it, I think, is going to be Bitcoin. The interesting thing, and the part where I actually agree with Michael Saylor in the 48-month roadmap, is that the strategic Bitcoin reserve executive order didn't really mean diddly shit to me until this Bitcoin bonds thing came out, which was earlier today. And because like the executive order for the strategic Bitcoin reserve was like, they didn't say buy Bitcoin. They said we were going to acquire it in a budget neutral fashion, which I was like, okay, that's a really political way of just saying, it's like, no, we're not going to fluff the price, which is like, makes sense.
We're going to shift assets.
Yeah, we're going to shift assets around. And the interesting thing is that the way like that, the presentation that Marty Bent put out through TFTC about the Bitcoin bonds framework is that it creates a way, it's a mechanism for funding the government through like their bond structure, but like 10% of it goes to buying Bitcoin. And then the profits of that Bitcoin appreciation is shared 50% with the bond holders and 50% with the government. That gets really interesting, because if that's deemed as desirable, like the SBR has its own kind of game theoretical flywheel to begin with. right? Just even by the U.S. saying it's like, hey, we're looking at making a strategic reserve for this asset. The rest of the world's going to be like, okay, we need to look into this a little bit closer if the U.S. is going to be doing it. But then this bonds thing, this bond structure is a completely separate
game changer.
Yeah, to the point of where like now that it's on the internet, the rest of the countries of the world can look at it and be like, this shit might actually work. And if we're going to do it, they're going to be doing it. And then then the other topic that I also wanted to touch in, which is also part of this conversation, is the Fort Knox gold. The theory behind the Fort Knox gold is not for Trump to prove that we don't have it. It is to prove that we have it, and we have more than we have been telling people.
Yeah.
And they want to reprice it to reflect market value. The crazy part is that gold is valued at $42 an ounce. Gold is $3,000 an ounce right now.
Yeah.
And there's an article written by Stephanie Kelton on her Substack. She ended it with a very muley kind of like whine about Bitcoin not making America great again, which I judged her for. But the rest of the article is actually pretty good, because if Trump were to do this, and I think that this is his intention, is effectively just printing a bunch of money that the government has to put in the Treasury General account so they can do like, whatever they want with it and kind of fix some of the budgeting issues. Now, you could use some of that funding to engage in the Bitcoin bonds kind of like scenario that we talked about, and then you're kicking things off to a massive race. So like the part that we're getting at is towards, if you scroll down, keep scrolling, the real reason, there we go. Real reason for the visit.
I think it's this part down here. When the United States went off the gold standard in 1933, the metals was priced at $20.67 a fine ounce, and the nation was owed about $4 billion worth at that price. After the revaluation at $35 an ounce in 1934, the same quantity of gold was worth nearly $7 billion, since each ounce is priced at 14.
So they effectively created $3 billion of funding just through some accounting manipulation.
Yeah, what they were talking about towards the end of this was basically you get into over $1 trillion worth in terms of the revaluation, which it's a long way from the 36 trillion that
no, yeah, but what, like, because like that's going to be used as an attack vector in headlines and everything against this strategy. What people aren't going to be thinking about is mixing the Bitcoin bond structure with because like what we're never gonna like wipe out the federal debt. Like that's never going to be a thing.
Right.
What like me and like my buddies like Magoo on Twitter believe is the likely roadmap is that we're going to use Bitcoin as a country to offset the deficit, so that like the amount of Bitcoin that we're holding offsets the debt, and then it looks like we're on par or we're break even, right? Because it's effectively never paying off your credit card, but then your investments are so good that you're effectively budget neutral. That's what they're going to do.
And over time, that's just going to grow and grow and grow, right? Like when you start, repricing these things, and I've kind of said this for a while, is the gold standard isn't dead. What's going to happen is you're going to go to a commodity based, kind of a BRICS type of agreement. And I don't know that BRICS is off the table for even the United States, right? If they're playing the bigger game, commodity is where you want to be. And if these guys have already established a network for BRICS, and now Europe's kind of alienating itself from the rest of the world by taking Ukraine's side, and maybe the US joins up with Putin and Russia, that is a very interesting strategic alliance which kind of starts to push the idea that this continuum we're going to be on maybe for a while is there's going to be a strategic Bitcoin reserve where things like gold and silver may be traded in physical form from one person to another for a while. And I don't know, like I'm anxious to see how this plays out, but at the end of the day, as we continue to push, and now that we've gotten to this networked effect, I think, I'm not going to say Bitcoin wins, but I'm going to say that it would take a complete catastrophic global event to shut it down.
Yeah. And like, a catastrophic event that's, on the level of like the Great Flood or Atlantis, right?
Right.
Because in order for that to happen, you'd have to wipe out all internet connectivity basically perpetually into the future to prevent like Bitcoin from continuing to chug along.
That's right.
Which is not something like I might be a doomer. I'm not that level of a doomer. Like, guys, there's nothing to be worried about with that, because if that were to happen, there's no planning for it. There's no stopping it. Like, just live your life. Like, holy crap.
Yeah, that's right. Mike, it's getting to be 10:30. We got to stop and talk about our sponsor before we get out of here tonight.
Yeah.
Our newest partner is Fountain FM. You can find them at fountain.fm. This is podcast and community that is just next level in terms of sharing. It's a social network for listeners. You can discover new podcasts and emerging artists, join in the conversation with fans across different apps. Support creators directly from their player. Literally, this works off of Lightning. So if you want to sign up and you go in there, you can get paid for not only listening, you can get paid for creating. And this is the beauty of what Fountain really is those people who are going and consuming and creating. If you love people's content, it is a direct back and forth. There's no middleman. It's not PayPal or anybody's going to shut you down. The guys over at Fountain FM are Bitcoiners. They're amazing guys. You can earn rewards for listening and sharing. This app is available for Android and iOS. They've got some of the biggest names in Bitcoin out there, including the Bitcoin veterans. If you convert new listeners, they are going to absolutely love this kind of stuff. Go out there, check them out. You can reach new audiences, you get paid by your listeners, build real community, and offer amazing new features. We're also one of their sponsors as well. So go out there and help those guys who are helping us. These guys do amazing things. They've always done great things for me when I was running Radical, and having a real relationship with these guys that do everything out of the goodness of their heart to bring you direct access to the people that you want to communicate with, the people that you like, and the communities you want to be in. Man, there's no better app out there than Fountain. So go out there and check them out, fountain.fm. And appreciate all the guys out in Fountain working with us and doing everything they do, and for as long as they've done it with me, especially. So thank you guys for doing all that. All right, Mike. Before we get out of here tonight, any parting thoughts?
I would have to say, now that spring's here, probably get outside and enjoy as much of it as you can.
Yeah.
Especially for those of you guys that are in the Midwest like me. Like, we really only get like maybe a month's worth of good spring weather before, because like in the Midwest, it'll go from, and it might actually just be the whole country. Because like when I was over in Kuwait, I got exposure to it, and I was like, oh, Kuwait's the exact same. Of just getting outside and enjoying it while you can before it's too hot to really get out there. Because I don't know if you guys are as in tune with nature as I am, but there's something that happens with your mood when you get outside and get some fresh air and just breathe it in, and you're not cooped up in your office or your home environment. So I'll just say that.
Yeah. That's a great message, man. I got to tell you, it's been a lot nicer down here in the South lately. And now that we're getting out of those frigid temperatures, getting outside, I went out and flew my own drone today, kind of went around, saw the lake, saw the mountain, and it was, beautiful thing. If you can get out, get a walk, get all that exercise in, I think it makes life better. Actually, saw an article today where the literal act of squeezing muscles, right? Like tensing muscles and releasing muscles, releases dopamine. So you've got this, built-in dopamine push to go for a walk. It's the easiest thing you can do. It's great for your mind. It's great for your body and everything else. So get out there and enjoy it in the season. And I got to say, thank you guys for being here. I should plug Bitcoin Alaska. Bitcoin Alaska is the first Bitcoin Veterans conference, and it's coming up in July of this year. Let me plug their page. BitcoinAlaska.org. Wade has done a fantastic job, and all the other Bitcoiners that are helping them out there from Bitcoin Veterans. This is July 3rd through the 6th. It's going to be in Juneau, Alaska. You can go out here to the website. They've got everything for the tickets and getting your site or your space booked for lodging and everything else. They've got whale passes. They've got some incredible speakers: Alex Gladstein, Lisa Huff, Gabe is going to be there, Don Bay. You got Coleman, who runs our daily show. Go check that out as well. That is every day on the East Coast at 10 a.m. in Spaces on X. You got Rustin, who's going to be there, Joseph Kelly and Trevor Bello. Like, this is going to be a heck of an event. We've got a lot of guys who are going to be up there. Go check them out. It's bitcoinalaska.org.
Ooh,
Anyway.
one other thing I'll plug too. Not necessarily a sponsor, but if you guys are interested, I'm going to be at BitBlock Boom April 3rd. I'm going to be there the 4th and the 5th, but it's the 3rd through the 6th, I believe, in Dallas.
Yep.
So if you guys want to meet up, have any coffee, I'll be available Friday evening into Saturday morning and afternoon. So that'll be a lot of fun. I literally just got the hotel and the flight the other day. So
I might meet you there, Mike.
Yeah, that'd be dope. It'd be a lot of fun.
We had a good time the last time we were there together. I guess that'll do it then. Thank you guys for everybody who's doing everything behind the scenes. Bitcoin Veterans is a growing network. I should plug this too. BitcoinVeterans.org. If you want to be part of this whole thing, you don't even have to be a veteran. Just go to BitcoinVeterans.org. We will plug you into the Signal chats. We've got chats for everything. We are onboarding a ton of people, and I am just amazed at how decentralized and growing this organization has become. It's incredible to me. So thank you guys out there for listening, sharing the show, telling your friends and family about these wild Bitcoin veterans that are doing, as much as they are. We appreciate it. This gives us a lot of purpose, a lot of meaning, puts us back on the mission. Until next time, we'll see you then. Peace.